Moving over to the grain markets now, we're joined this week by Darin Newsom of Darin Newsom Analysis. This week we saw a rally in both the U.S. dollar and in the grain markets. Darin, you point out that's not really something that's supposed to happen. What gives?
Yeah, it's always interesting, Bryce, and appreciate you having me on again. The old story is, if the dollar's going up, grain should not. And what we've got going on now is different than most rallies like we see like this. We're just short supply of everything. And so it doesn't really matter if the dollar's going higher, because part of the reason why the dollar's going higher is because of inflation and the moves that the U.S. Federal Reserve is going to make. And it's part of the inflation is due to the fact that we just don't have many, we don't have much corn, soybeans, or wheat on the books right now, or in the bins right now. Everyone's waiting on these next harvests. So we've got the scenario where tight supplies, strong demand, and the Fed's going to make some moves to try to control inflation by pushing interest rates higher, and that strengthens the dollar. So everything's going up at the same time at this point.
So you said we've definitely got a lot of question marks out there, but which one is most fascinating and which one's most important to pay attention this time of year? Does it have to do with the planting progress?
No, not whatsoever. Those numbers are completely fictitious. We have to watch the weather. I mean, above all else, these markets are weather derivatives. And so, I mean, if people want to tie that to things like planting progress and conditions, fine, they can play that game. But the reality is we can see where there's problems. And there's planting that's being done right now, but it's being done in terrible conditions. It's incredibly dry. So folks across the central plains and southern plains are really counting on this week's rains. And that's going to change, what our expectations are for these markets down the road. The biggest thing is, regardless of what the acres are, regardless of what yield turns out to be, and all of these other guesses that like to be made about the markets, the commercial side is telling us there's not going to be enough. I mean, we can look at the future spreads, corn, soybeans, wheat, across the board. There's not going to be enough production in 2022 to change these supply and demand situations, regardless of what all these unknown variables are. And that's the key. And it all comes back to weather. And it's just how tight is it going to be depends on, what the weather how the weather develops.
So Darin, if there's not enough product for any of those markets you just mentioned, what is the ceiling for these grain markets in your opinion?
I have no idea. As long as the fundamentals stay bullish, these markets can go higher. They're going to continue to find they're going to continue to find non-commercial investment, fund money, whatever you want to call it. I was asked today, is $8 corn a good buy? Yeah. I mean, if they're fundamentally bullish, why not? It's just a number. And we'll know if bubbles are starting to form in this market, if it's becoming a bubble market based on what happens with basis. If basis all of a sudden starts to collapse, it means the commercial side is no longer supporting these markets. And that's when bubbles form. Right now, that's simply not the case.
Darin, let's talk about distillates. We're not talking about bourbon when we talk about that, though. You say there's strength in the markets. Bring us up to speed.
Oh, the distillates market. And again, it's fun to always talk about bourbon, but in this case, we're talking about diesel fuel, jet fuel, heating oil, all these things. It's just been on an incredible run lately. I think on Tuesday, I believe it gained as much as something like 48 cents, the spot month futures contract, and it followed up with another big rally, 15, 20 cents on Wednesday. Just, huge moves. We're getting into that time of year. No, it's not heating season for heating oil, but there's going to be more field work, at least theoretically, is going to be done. We've got strong demand globally for diesel fuel. And so, this market's just taking off and flying right now. And it's outdistanced. It's clearly outdistancing crude oil at this point. It's actually leading the charge in the energy complex, and certainly something we're going to have to continue to watch.
Darin, every time we have you on Market Journal, we always get some interesting viewer questions. So I want to make sure we get a few of them included in the broadcast. One of them has to do with selling or locking in prices for the 2023 crop. What's your take on what producers should be doing right now?
It's what I always say. If my dad were sitting across the table from me and asked, hey, is this a good time to make some sales? I'd say yes. I'm not going to talk you out of selling at a profit, but I don't want to sell very much. I think these markets still have some room. I think they still have some room to move higher. Again, fundamentally, everything is bullish right now for 2022. And this situation extends out to 2023, and even in soybeans out through 2024-25 marketing year. So we've got plenty of time. But by all means, if we want to lock some of this in, even if it's just to pay some of the input costs, the fuel we were just talking about, fertilizer prices that continue to go up, then you do that. Make a few sales here and there. Keep plenty of powder dry, because we have no idea what the weather's going to deal us this summer, then next winter, and on into next spring as well.
You mentioned the price of fertilizer. Another viewer asked if we could ask you about that. What are you seeing when it comes to the fertilizer prices right now?
I don't know what the prices are at this point. I do know they're not coming down anytime soon. They're going to stay high this year, probably through the winter and into next year. The situation in Ukraine with Russia's war against Ukraine, the overall tightness of the fertilizer supply situation is not going to allow prices to come down. We've got strong demand here in the U.S., particularly if we're going to get a poor seeding on the corn crop. Will farm and prices where they are, will producers be willing to fork out a little bit more to kind of chase and push the supplies that are available out there, increasing the prices even more? So I think it's going to be a very tight situation as far as getting fertilizer locked in. And those that can find the fertilizer, price is going to be pretty high.
Ben had a question for you in regards to logistics, particularly shipping logistics. Seems like we've had some bottlenecks of sorts. I'm not sure how you'd classify it, Darin, when it comes to shipping logistics. What do you make of that right now?
Yeah, it was a great question. Came in on Twitter, and I really appreciate him sending it in. Yeah, the issue is we're seeing so many port shutdowns in China, Singapore, and so on. And his question was, if these vessels are getting shut down in Singapore, what'll that do to U.S. exports? I looked it up. The U.S. only ships about 10% via that method of freight. Our biggest thing is bulk loading across for the ocean. So that's where we do most of our business, but it will have an effect. Right now, we haven't really seen our shipments slow down. And where we are seeing U.S. shipments slow down has more to do with the fact we're running out of supplies. The biggest thing is we're seeing soybeans drop off. Part of this is seasonal. Part of it is we don't have the supply of soybeans to fill the unshipped sales that we already have on the books. And what makes that even more interesting is the fact USDA keeps making these little announcements of old crop sales, bushels we just don't have. And with the situation going on in the oilseed complex, with Indonesia saying, look, they're banning palm oil exports, there's going to be more demand for soybean oil, canola, and so on. We're going to have to put more of our soybean supplies into bean oil crushing for bean oil. It's going to make exports of soybeans that much tighter.